If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Hi, I'm Andrew Rich, and if you're like me, you look at the state of modern wrestling discourse and think, wow, what a cesspool. That's why I'm here to tell you about Music of the Mat Remix. That's right, your favorite wrestling music podcast is back with a new format, where I bring on a guest and we play songs related to wrestling-themed topics. It could be a wrestling reference, a wrestling concept, a wrestling pun, things of that nature. Now you might be saying, Andrew, that is a very, very tenuous connection to pro wrestling on a wrestling podcast network. Is this just an excuse to hang out with your friends and talk about music and ignore the rest of the wrestling landscape? Yes. Yes, it is. So listen to Music of the Mat Remix on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast player of choice.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to Those Days, a Michinoku Pro retrospective. Episode 12, The End of 1995. Those Days is brought to you by Open the Voice Gate and the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed, but also on the dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, you could follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you would like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red boxes that sponsors podcasting. You accept a one-time or recurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside your other host, Case Lowe. And Case, we closed out last episode with the conclusion of the first ever Fukumen Mask League, and one of the real high points, at least if you look at Michinoku Pro, but before these days in 1996. And we're quickly going to be having this interesting kind of smash time that we're in the middle of. But Case, I wanted to kind of kick us off a little bit with a note that we had coming out of one of the last episodes of Those Days in the Discord, talking about tapes and how things kind of were for some of the tape traders as it relates to the Michinoku Pro kind of tape trading situation. Is that all right? All right, if I throw this in here at the start?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So Tim Cook in the Discord talked about talking to Jeff Lynch, one of the prominent tape traders in 2001, about the 1995 Mask League. And he said that the 95 Mask League commercial tape sold okay, especially for a non-New Japan, All Japan deathmatch tape. But he still saw the 1996 commercial releases go faster. His theory, and at least this is when Tim Cook asked Jeff Lynch in 2001, was the confusion about the guys not going underneath their real names, and that the original tape list that he would have had back in 1995 was it didn't ID Jerry Lynn, and there was no cage match, obviously, to go back and to look it up. And Tim added in as a second note parenthetical. I don't even think Loreface listed the real names until a big 2002 update. So I thought that was an interesting note to kind of put a bow on the Fukuoka Mass League as we then turn to close out 1995 and Michinoku Pro.
Yeah, I think especially when you look at it within the context of what Michinoku Pro was doing in 1995, that's an interesting thing to note, because as we get further and further along in this project, the way the footage shapes out is interesting, where right now we're still in a pre-Samurai TV setting, and so we just have the Champ Forum episodes to go off of, and occasionally we scrape something off of a comp DVD that maybe aired there but didn't air on television. As we get along, as I was just looking at some of the 1997 and 1998 show notes, the battle back and forth between the Gaora and Samurai TV stuff and what airs and what doesn't and what we still need to track down and what's widely circulated is a pretty interesting thing to me. But 95, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do this project was 1993 is the beginning. 1994, there's Shinzaki versus Sasuke and Sasuke versus Onita. We all know about 1996. There's these years, though, 95 and 97 and 98 before Crazy Max comes in, where this is the sort of stuff that really intrigued me. And Mike, I mean, I think we had to dig a little bit deeper for the footage for this particular episode than any other episode that we've done so far. So it's interesting that something like the Mass League has the reputation that it does, but that's sort of the only thing from Michinoku Pro in 1995 that has any sort of reputation. And as we go through some of the footage in this episode, just off the top, I found some of what we watched to be pretty disappointing, and I found some of what we watched to be awesome, and I'm very, very glad that we tracked some of this stuff down.
Yeah, this has been going through the footage of this episode. I really kind of grew to have a deep appreciation for a couple of guys on the roster, and I feel like as we get through this, and it's something really as we turn to 1996. I think it puts a lot of 1995 in context. Like by the point we were getting to the end of today's episode and the end of 1995 for Michinoku Pro, what we're really seeing is kind of how the company reacted to the fact that it was very clear as 1995 started in Michinoku Pro, the real plan was, we are going to go now heel Sato versus and Kaientai versus the entirety of Delphin Corps. And when they lost Sato, a lot of things kind of felt like that they got put up on like spinning plates and tried to keep busy with it. And whereas that also gave time for acts like the Dream Chasers to come about in this episode. And really for me, like if we weren't calling this episode the end of 1995, there's something about the team name that Shoichi Funaki and Taka Michinoku get that now that we're seeing them team together, and I feel like that they, as we get into this, will kind of become a touchstone coming out of 1995 and finishing out the year. There is one person who I feel like should be on the tip of everyone's lips, and that is Taka Michinoku, given some of the stuff that we will talk about tonight.
So I like that you say that, because especially for these episodes, I mean, even when we talk contemporary Dragon Gate, very rarely do we talk about our opinions before we record. But for these shows, we hardly ever share opinions beforehand.
I think it makes better audio, and the way that our relationship and our chemistry works, frankly, is that unless that we have big things, and I view you within the wrestling space as one of my better longtime friends, I feel like for the audio sense, it is better that we kind of come into it, both of us, with our own cemented views, and we explore how they intersect on audio. Like that's always kind of been my theory about this.
Yeah, I mean, I say that because one, for as well as I know you and I know your taste, every once in a while you still hit me with a curveball, which I'm always absolutely delighted by. But I like that you say that, because I was going to tell you before we started breaking down these matches that you're going to hear me praise Taka Michinoku profusely in this episode. I mean, this is, we said this a little bit in 93 and a little bit in 94, and I've been telling people like, hey, if you sort of only know late stage Taka, or if you associate Taka with being a wrestler in the United States, maybe more so than you do in Michinoku Pro, and you've been following along in the series, you might not be ready for just how good Taka Michinoku is at various points in time. And we are now, I mean, we're hitting, I think, just as somebody that's watched so much of his career, because I really, really enjoy his work from 94 to about 2002. And then I get a little bit of a blind spot there with him working K Dojo and him working All Japan during a time in which I wasn't really, or not, obviously I wasn't following the promotion in real time, but it's not, mid 2000s All Japan is not necessarily a sweet spot for me. And then I enjoy Suzuki Gun era grumpy veteran Taka Michinoku, but we're entering a guy at the peak of his powers. And it's why, in 2021, or so, in 2016, when I did Greatest Wrestler Ever for Pro Wrestling Only, Taka was a guy that finished on the back half of my list, but was nevertheless, to me, one of the 100 greatest wrestlers ever. And as my palette expanded, and as I watched more wrestling, and as my taste changed, when we went back and did a list in 2021, Taka was a name that I initially had circled as somebody that I was assuming would fall off the ballot in the same way that, maybe in 2016, I really valued Matt Hardy in a way that I didn't in 2021. And maybe the way that I valued a William Regal had changed. And, I had, I think Ryo Saito might have been on my 2016 list because I love him at the peak of his powers. I don't want to pick on necessarily, some grapple fuck type wrestlers, but I had assumed that my taste had changed enough to where Taka would no longer be on that top 100. And then I went back and watched this era of Taka Michinoku, and he is, to me, so obviously one of the 100 greatest wrestlers ever. The only shame is that the prime of his career is just not longer. And I think had he been wrestling now, or as we get into 1996, 1997, 1998, had his career just gone differently, I think that would be a more universal opinion. But I'm warning everybody now, as we get into the audio for this episode, it is a Taka Michinoku heavy round of footage, and it is going to be a Taka Michinoku heavy praise type of episode.
Yeah, it really is a strong time for him, and it's also something that, if we're looking like big picture, and especially on the heels of Fuchman Mass League, as someone who is one of the few unmasked wrestlers on the roster, he essentially got de-emphasized for the greater part of 3 months, and essentially is kind of a little bit adrift here. And it's just so nice to see him just kind of coming and raging, especially as the Dream Chasers team and Soichi Funaki is becoming now a more permanent member of the Michinoku roster going forward. And especially starting at this point, he is now a main character going forth in those days canon.
Yeah, I mean, Taka, he's working on the undercard on those Masked League shows, but he's not a masked guy, so he's got no focus there. And so we really didn't get to talk about him last time, but that will certainly change this time around. I mean, there were a few wrestlers that I really enjoyed as we went through this footage, but none more so than Taka Michinoku in this episode.
Yeah, and I think with that, it's probably about time for us to get underway. This is probably for listeners who like following along and getting the playlist. This is going to be one of the heavy work episodes for y'all, but I would encourage everyone, in a lot of the situations, that even the stuff that does not necessarily resonate enough if you're someone who is wanting like an intro to Taka Michinoku, I feel like a lot of that can kind of start from this episode. And at least for me, even though some of the stuff was not the most top end of the Michinoku spectrum, at least to date, you're not going to go wrong with Taka Michinoku on this episode.
A very good wrestler. As we jump into the timeline here, we're going to start with the Wrestling Observer newsletter. This is on September 18th, 1995, in which Dave writes that Michinoku Pro's next tour will be September 14th through the 26th, with Kato Kung Lee Sr. from Mexico, Stevie J from England, the newest Tiger Mask, and Zebra, who is Shunji Takano, along with the regulars. Zebra will stand out like a sore thumb here, as these guys are all 190 pounds or less, and much less than 5'7". Zebra is about 6'7" and 340 pounds. He would continue talking about Michinoku Pro in the New Japan section, as he noted that New Japan will be holding its annual tag team tournament from 10:15 to 10:30, with nothing announced as of press time, despite last year having a very successful junior heavyweight tournament, which drew more interest and sold out almost every night in comparison to the heavyweight tournament, which, because the competitors were more blasé, didn't draw as well. They aren't going to repeat the business they did last year, because Michinoku Pro gave them strong enough juniors to do a complete tag tournament. They are running major shows on 10/29 in Fukuoka as a part of the tournament, and so the UWFI show on 10/29 in Yoyogi will be limited. If any interpromotional matches on that show take place, it will be Takada versus Tamura. I note that there because I think one of the big revelations for me last year was post Super J Cup, just how well the Super Junior Tag League 1994 for New Japan did. And Dave is outright saying here, because they aren't partnering with Michinoku Pro as much in 1995, that tournament from a box office perspective is already doomed.
Yeah, and with this at this time, I think when you look at the New Japan Brain Trust, this is kind of Choshu reflexively like kind of batting down some of the things that he really disliked coming out of bringing in all those juniors in 1994 to the company's detriment, to be quite honest. I mean, we saw kind of how Sasuke was getting booked in New Japan into 1995, and there's a clear de-emphasization, and it's not from Liger, if that at any stretch of imagination. It has to be coming from like Choshu or elsewhere within the booking office.
Well, that's the strange thing, is that I don't really feel like we've ever had a definitive reason for why Michinoku Pro was featured so strongly in 1994 and then de-emphasized in 1995 in the context of the New Japan Junior division. Now, there will come a time in 1997 where Michinoku Pro and New Japan are once again very, very tight, and there is a very clear demarcation point, a very clear line in the sand as to why New Japan stops working with Michinoku Pro. And that changes everybody's careers. That is the biggest sliding glass door moment, I think, in the history of this promotion. And we'll get to that when we get to it. But in 95, it's strange because I don't remember any sort of political fallout or any sort of double cross or any sort of reason why New Japan would go away. But this is a reoccurring theme. You know, when Dave announced the Super Juniors tournament of the Observer, he goes, well, there's not going to be Michinoku guys, so the tour is not going to be as good. And the tag league here, well, there's no Michinoku guys, so the tour isn't going to be as good. And as we talk about the Super J Cup 1995 at the end of this episode, Dave opens up with, well, they have Michinoku guys, but they aren't the ones they had last year, so the tournament's not going to be as good. And it's a real emphasis of, if you're looking for work rate, you know, junior heavyweight work rate in the mid 90s, at this point in time, it's the reputation is you need to have the Michinoku Pro guys, almost in the same way of a decade later on the US Indies. The reputation that the Dragon Gate guys had was, if Ring of Honor, you know, I would imagine if I went back and looked at the Observer from April of 2009, Dave is probably writing that the Ring of Honor show in Houston that year was going to be great, but they won't have the Dragon Gate guys, so the show might not be as good.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It is something where like you notice that part of like a steep drop off, and I think it's interesting. Just touching on the foreigners that are coming in, at least for like this tour here. Stevie J, I'm pretty now convinced is the King's Cross, so it was more that he stayed after Fukuman Mass League here. Shunji Takano is one of those kind of characters that were that kind of fell out because of the machinations that came out of SWS with that. I mean, he was part of Pro Wrestling Crusaders with his brother, and that quickly dies out in 1994. He's greatly, in a lot of ways, wrapping up his wrestling career at this point, but really just like a odd name to bring in for them, at least like going into Sendai. It is one of their it is the only 1,000-seat tickets on this one tour, but I think that's kind of interesting. And then Kato Kungli Sr., one of Kendo and Blackman's famous tag team partners. So
yeah, I have more thoughts on Kato Kungli in a second, because I think he has a really interesting career, and I think it's very important that as we do this show and as you and I continue to sort of dig our claws into just the idea of Lucharesu history, Kato Kungli is somebody that is incredibly important to getting to what would become modern day Dragon Gate. So we continue the time.
Go ahead. That trio of his.
Oh my God, absolutely.
With Blackman, I'm blanking on what the Phantasmas, I think.
Los Fantasticos.
Los Fantasticos. Sorry, my bad.
Which, as we'll talk about, not even his original trio that he made a name in, which is interesting as we get to some of the matches that he worked. But anyways, on September 14th, 1995, Michinoku Pro ran a show. This is the Michinoku Pro debut of Tiger Mask 4. He teamed with Hanzo Nakajima, defeating Hoshikawa and Stevie J, which I think is a fascinating matchup on a number of levels. It's a shame that we don't have footage from that show, but we do have footage from the September 25th, 1995 Michinoku Pro show. We have two matches on this show. We have Kato Kungli Sr. and Tiger Mask versus Taka Michinoku and Super Delphin. Is that a tag? That was a tag match, yes. And then Great Sasuke.
Delphin Core.
Yes, thank you. Great Sasuke versus Stevie J for the British Junior Heavyweight Championship. Mike, this show, I would say, is one of those that was very poorly circulated
Yeah.
because the second half of the broadcast is what, a Hakushi versus Bret Hart match?
Yeah, so this is one that I will make sure that the matches that will go up on YouTube aren't going to get struck, because when I first got this one, we had to search this one out. This is as a part of a comp tape that had part of the Anafukuman Mass League. And as I put it on up on a private YouTube for case, going like, all right, buddy, here we go with this. Immediately got struck down. What I did not realize until I started scrubbing through it was that essentially it was Shimizu and the other guys' road trip to the United States, including the Bret Hart and the Hakushi match. So it really is just these two matches from a sellout and Akita here, with a couple interesting things on the card that I would have been intrigued to see. Mostly in particular, in a very just demented sense, I want to see Kendo in the Wilkins versus Yone Genjin match that happened. But we don't get that. Instead, we get this tag match, as well as the British Junior Heavyweight title switch.
As for the tag match, it is interesting to watch, again, as we go back to our first of many Taka Michinoku points throughout this episode. Taka is doing so much in the span of 3 months. He is, as you'll see here, he is working with the brand new Tiger Mask, which does not feel like an accident. Later, we watch him wrestle FMW guys. He's obviously wrestling core members of the roster. He is the Swiss Army knife on the roster at this point. I think he's far more versatile than Sasuke was. I think what's shocking is he's far more versatile than Delphin is at this point in time.
Yes.
And so it's not an accident that Tiger Mask 4, who they want to take care of, is positioned in the ring with Taka incredibly often in the first few months of his career. And we get to see the birth of what is excellent chemistry between the two, even in this short tag match that ends in a DQ.
Yeah, Tiger Mask and Taka have incredible chemistry, and Taka is at a point in his career that he's no longer like the whipping post. He's no longer the guy that Dolphin said, "Hey, I want to team with you, join Dolphin Corps." He is clearly his own person. Essentially, during the Fukuin Mask League, that is when the tag team of Shoichi Funaki kind of galvanizes, as Funaki is going after Sasuke during this time. And it's really kind of interesting to see it, because what the best way to describe him is that he is, in 1995 in the fall, I think one of the best piranhas we've ever seen in pro wrestling. What do I mean by a piranha? He starts this match, and the second that Tiger Mask 4 goes for the corner flip into the corner flip kick outwards, he steps back afterwards and immediately hauls off and punches him in the face. The most devastating move from Taka Michinoku is his forearm that he puts his whole strength into, and it looks like that he's going for a knockout blow every single time, and he just loses it on Tiger Mask throughout this. He provides a form of seriousness to Dolphin Corps that is absent a lot of this episode until he is teaming with Delphin again at the end of the year. But he is just so great in this. He Mask rips Tiger Mask, getting the obvious DQ, just pull apart brawling action. It's not a great performance to see too much of Kato Kung Lee in it, but what it really is well, you essentially, for the rest of the year, you have this great Tiger Mask versus Taka Michinoku feud, and it starts with this match, and it really continues throughout the rest of 1995, and it's the best thing that I think goes on in the promotion during that time span.
I'm unaware at this current stage, just because I don't remember how much of Kato Kung Lee footage we get in 1996, but I know we get him for a few different matches here on this tour at the end of 1995, and I hope that he pops up more, because he's a wrestler that really interests me. For those that don't know, this is a guy who was born in Panama, started wrestling in Mexico in the mid-70s, adopted an Asian kung fu gimmick, and then not only became 1/3 of Los Fantasticos with Kung Fu and with Black Man, but also, and this is why I want to bring this up here, is that in the late 70s in the UWA, he was teaming with Kung Fu, who they were first a tag team. They became best friends in real life. And if you read interviews with Kato Kung Lee after Kung Fu's passing in 2001, whenever Kung Fu would come up, he would talk about how hard it is to talk about him because he passed away and that he missed him so much. But in the late 70s, they formed a trio with Satoru Sayama as Triangulo Oriental. So this is a guy who not only is a part of a revolutionary trio in the mid 80s in the UWA that changes the way that we look at trios wrestling and is a big part of the reason that Hamada's Universal came to be in the first place. But a few years before that, he's one of the key parts of establishing Satoru Sayama in Mexico. And so I think it's great to see him team with Tiger Mask here. Do you know the story behind Kato Kung Lee's death?
No, I have to say that Kato Kung Lee as a wrestler was not someone etched into my brain other than being the tag team partner later on with Black Man and Kendo. Like, not even like Kung Fu is not someone who is like with this. I do know that his son is a world renowned piece of shit though.
Oh, I don't know that. That's interesting.
Oh, he's the one that started, at least at the time recording, the nasty stuff about Conan.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, like he's kind of known as a Facebook shit stir. More about possible shit stirs next week on VoiceGate.
So Kato Kung Lee's death was a weird one because it was announced that he had passed away in the middle of a Friday night Arena Mexico show in 2016. And like, you know, at this point in time, Super Porky is still alive, and Super Porky would have worked Kato Kung Lee a million times. And so like he's visibly distraught over this. And once CMLL makes the announcement, AAA is also running that night, and AAA makes the announcement that he's passed away because he worked in both promotions. But I associate him with CMLL and then later IWRG. But it turns out not dead. He would pass away the next day, but was still alive at the time that both CMLL and AAA were mourning his death, which is just a very odd historical anecdote for him. He is somebody that I want to go back and really take a look at his 1991 and 1992 in CMLL because I'm very intrigued by his matches with Kung Fu once they became rivals instead of teammates. I was reading today, and now I'm going to forget. I forget if it was Antonio Pena before the AAA split or if it was somebody else that was a CMLL office guy. But I was reading today in the Lucha World obit of Kato Kung Lee that essentially they broke some house rules in their matches, but everybody looked the other way because they were hitting each other so hard whenever they would wrestle each other that everybody was interested in seeing just how hard they could hit each other when they would wrestle. Which I think is just an excellent anecdote.
Hey, yeah, just knocking the crap out of each other.
Yeah, I know he's got some matches with Moka Kota in the early 90s that I know are pretty well regarded as well. So that's on my list. But here you see him. It's more apparent in the Tag League Finals, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. But what I like about him, and it's the same reason that I like so much of the Hamada's Universal footage, especially when it's Los Fantasticos and it's Brazos and it's those UWA guys working in Japan, especially in 90 and 91, before that roster becomes dominantly Japanese, is they're doing a style of wrestling that is just gone now. You know, there's an evolution from UWA to Hamada's students working at Hamada's Universal to Michinoku Pro to Toryumon to Dragon Gate, and then sort of the way that Dragon Gate has put their tentacles into every corner of Major League Pro Wrestling. But with that evolution, certain things get lost due to time. And I don't think there's anybody in Mexico and Japan and the United States wrestling in the way that a Kendo did or a Kung Fu did or a Black Man did or a Kato Kung Lee did.
You know who are the two that kind of perpetuated a bit longer after they stopped touring Japan? If you want to kind of do this and you're willing to make it a little bit tenuous of a connection here, Case, I think the people that you would look to would be Kunishibo came in and Kikutaro / Ebisan.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. They
If you go
unfortunately,
fully towards the comedic side of what they do,
yeah,
like
no, I see what you're saying there. Yeah, because
it's
they don't have
tenuous, but
they
yeah.
don't have the resume of the great matches, but that's such an odd comparison. But you're so right, because I guess in terms of just like the way they move around the ring, those guys probably are the closest.
Yep, that's kind of my logic, even though theirs isn't a complete comedy context. Like I think about especially how both him and Kendo do kind of like triangle rope walks in the corners for a lot of moves. And that's just something that just doesn't exist anymore outside of those two guys who I swear Kineshibo came and probably did that exact move somewhere in Osaka yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're exactly right. So that is the first match on that taping. Ends in a DQ finish, short, sweet, to the point. I understand why it aired, and then we get this Stevie J versus Great Sasuke match that, in a weird way, is fascinating.
Yeah, so on the tape we get another Stevie J promo, and that's when I was like, oh yeah, no, this guy's the King's Cross, and it's Stevie J defending this vague British Commonwealth Junior Heavyweight title against the Great Sasuke. And one thing we have to admit at this point, Stevie J has got himself over to this roster with his like Stevie J kind of chant, but this match really was a service of getting a vanity title onto Sasuke, and Stevie J kind of getting himself to like a certain point that I think we could say that he has like nimbly kind of improved from his first matches into this promotion, probably throughout Fukumen if we were going to go him and him being the King's Cross, and then probably having his best performance to date as under his real name against the Great Sasuke.
Yeah, he's just an awkward little wrestler. I mean, there
He
were
even
moments in
cusses
this
himself
match.
in this match too.
Yeah, yeah. We get probably half of it, maybe a little bit more than half of it. It's a 20-minute match in total. I feel like we get about 10. And there are moments in the match where you go like, oh, I see what they see. This is an interesting wrestler that was, moldable. And I think had he come around 10 years later and was working 2005 Dragon Gate instead of 1995 Michinoku Pro, I think Dragon Gate would have been a little bit more patient with him. And I think he could have developed into something really nice. But the combination of him being inconsistent move to move and Sasuke being Sasuke, which is a nice way of saying inconsistent move to move, you just get a weird match where they do a lot of really ugly moves and then they do a lot of moves that look gorgeous. Like Sasuke hits a bridging German in this match. It's the finish. It's absolutely incredible. And you forget that this is a guy who has the fundamentals that he has. But it's a strange match that for me was very much start and stop and hard to get invested in as a result.
Yeah, in a way, it's going to be a kind of similar to the next match we will talk about in some veins and stretches of imagination. But like you have a moment that this Akita room is super small too, and the way that they're filming it, like I guess like maybe Shimizu just brought a camera to the show that he was hanging out at and decided, oh, I should probably tape these matches for a champ forum. It kind of felt like that, and because of that, you get like the camera like focus on CVJ when he's on the outside, and you completely miss the wind up for a Sasuke special. It just goes crashing right into him. It's real. It really is kind of a bizarre thing, but it is kind of really short stop. And now the British Commonwealth title, which is a title that we will talk about throughout the rest of those days, is now permanently on Sasuke's waist, or at least on someone within the Michinoku Pros World's waist. And we'll be talking about some other British Commonwealth stuff throughout the show.
Yeah, so they would continue running shows throughout the month of October.
But before we hop into this, it's worth noting, and I'll touch onto it when we get to this point. Funaki still wants Sasuke after this match. And this is all built up from when Sasuke broke his leg and Funaki was still kind of going after him. So that feud is still happening at this point, and it will pay off later on in the episode.
We go to the Observer on October 9th, 1995, where Dave notes that the Akira Hokuto and Kensuke Sasaki wedding ceremony took place on October 1st and was the biggest wrestling news of the week in Japan, which included major celebrities from Japan, such as famous music and acting stars and media figures, along with wrestling names like Antonio Inoki, Aja Kong, Bull Nakano, Keiji Muto, Shinya Hashimoto, Manami Toyota, Great Sasuke, and Dave notes that, yes, he wore his mask, Jushin Thunder Liger, and Hayabusa. I have this in there just because I think it's important to note that Dave is listing Sasuke among the likes of Inoki and Muto and Hashimoto and Liger and Hayabusa, and he doesn't feel out of place in that list at this time.
No. You know, there's no notes about Liger or Hayabusa wearing their masks.
No, I thought that was weird. I'm glad you said that because I thought that was strange that Dave noted that only Sasuke was.
Well, you know where my brain went to? It went to the fact that Sasuke famously got arrested because he assaulted someone about taking photos of him in his mask. So, you know, we see those tendencies 15 years before.
Yeah, that's fair. So we continue in the Observer. This is 10/23/95. Dave notes that Michinoku Pro will be holding its own tag team tournament from November 12th through November 23rd, with Sasuke teaming with Kato Kung Lee, Delphin teaming with Nanawa, Taka Michinoku teaming with Sochi Funaki, the Convict teaming with Yone Genjin, and Hoshikawa teaming with Nakajima. So that would come in November, and we get the finals of that tournament on tape, which we'll talk about later in this episode. The bummer is that, and we have this note from the Observer on October 30th, is that one, Dave knows that Michinoku Pro ran a show as a part of a festival on 10/22 and drew 6,000 fans. This is something that happens a lot throughout the history of Michinoku Pro and later Osaka Pro, where they're set up at these street festivals or these city festivals, and they draw these enormous houses, and it seems very good for the promotion. The thing that is more relevant to the day-to-day of Michinoku Pro is that on October 21st, before a crowd of 639 fans, Pantera captured the UWF Super Welterweight title from Super Delphin, and Dave notes that Pantera also holds the CMLL Welterweight title, which he pinned Sasuke for at Arena Mexico earlier in the year. So this is the title that Delphin held from 1992 to 1995. And then Sato beat him in March of 1995 and then immediately got hurt and had to vacate the title. We talked about the match between Delphin and Triton, who was just a different gimmick for Pantera. That match took place in May. We watched that. We watched Delphin versus Taka from June of 1995. We do not get the other two defenses, which is Delphin versus Kato Kung Lee on September 26, 1995, which would have been great. We also do not get, from October 11th of 1995, a 15-minute Delphin versus Solaire match for the title. That's the main event of that show. Semi-main event, Grand Hamada, Great Sasuke, and Tiger Mask versus Grand Nanawa, Shochi Funaki, and Taka Michinoku. Those two matches have to go towards the top of the Michinoku Pro Holy Grail list for me.
Yeah, and I think like that this is an overall issue that we have with the Futabare Tabi tournament. Like this is its longest running tournament, and really we only ever get the finals for this. And we miss out on a lot of stuff on tape. Interestingly enough, the UWF Super Welterweight title at this point, I'm willing to declare, was a title that basically Delphin bought and made for himself. And it now will be going away, will not re-enter our story for a couple more episodes, with Pantera having this kind of run here for it. But also I wanted to point out for our Dragon Gate listeners, that title change happens in Yamato's hometown of Ichinoseki.
Oh, fantastic.
Maybe, given Yamato's age, could Yamato have been at this show?
Yamato never talks about, like, I don't know what wrestling he watched as a kid.
I think he was like a UWFI kid.
I think so too. He would strike me as somebody that maybe didn't watch wrestling as a kid and just stumbled into it. That would not surprise me.
Just watch like the combat shoot style wrestling styles.
Yeah.
But
Dave, go ahead.
No, I'm ready.
Dave has a note on November 6th of 1995, and we'll talk about this here because we're almost going chronological, that Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi was running a major show on November 19th in the Yokohama Bunka Gym with Ultimo Dragon, Great Sasuke, and the Gladiator from FMW being brought in. Sasuke would defend his title, his British Junior Heavyweight title, on that show against Funaki. This is such a fascinating show on a number of levels. This did make tape. It's not a show that I watched this time around. It is a show that I have seen matches from before, because the semi-main event of this show, as I scramble to find this card here, the semi-main of this show, or I'm sorry, I guess third from the top, was Yuki Ishikawa versus Taka Michinoku, which is a match that I greatly enjoyed. Mike, do you know who Ultimo Dragon wrestles on this show?
I'm looking at it right now, and given some things, my eyes are bulging right now. It's Takashi Okamura and then mixed martial arts rules mats.
That's right. A different style fight between two men that would go on to legitimately hate each other. Ultimo Dragon and Takashi Okamura. Just a really fun piece of history there. Also on the undercard, 1995 Minoru Tanaka versus 1995 Alexander Otsuka. But Mike, you watched this main event, Sasuke versus Funaki, British Commonwealth Junior Heavyweight title. I did not. What can you tell me about this match?
This match is so fascinating because this is the most adaptation that Sasuke has made as a visiting wrestler. It's essentially a Funaki working that broken leg and doing like all kinds of leg picks and spams and working for knee bars all throughout of it. And Sasuke, like we were talking about his fundamentals, this is a Sasuke's fundamentals match. There is a certain moment that then it turns on and the crowd guy goes like, oh, this is the Sasuke we kind of came. Like the crowd was a little quiet, frankly, up until that point. And then they go absolutely nuts for the closing stretch. Funaki feels like he's fully online at this point. And as he afterwards, with the closure of PWFRG or PWFG, like ending up in it here, it was a match I'd probably go 3.5 stars on. Sasuke retains with a Thunderfire powerbomb, but it's just an interesting match, if only for, I feel like Sasuke adapting to the surroundings much more so than he ever really would with FMW versus Onita outside of the barbed wire explosion match. Like he kind of did a more grounded wrestling style for about 10 minutes of this 15-minute main event.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back and check this out then because I'm intrigued by the sound of that. Just to jump ahead of the notes, this would be the last official canonized Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi show. I think they run like 2 spot shows in 1996, maybe one a year later, but this is for all intents and purposes the end of that promotion, with Dave noting that Sasuke headlined to beat Funaki on top, with Ultimo Dragon working a mixed martial arts match, with the FMW guys having a match, and the Gladiator blowing out his knee and maybe needing surgery as a result. And then Dave would note to this Observer, this is from November 27th, that almost all the wrestlers from PWFG quit the promotion after the show, with the exceptions being Daisuke Ikeda, Soichi Funaki, and of course Fujiwara, and joined with Fujiwara's longtime protege Yuki Ichikawa for a new group called Alpha Japan Promotions, which runs its first show on January 13th at Korakuen Hall. It is rumored they will do shows with help from both Rings and FMW, which is a weird combination of promotions to be working together. Go ahead. Because I think you're going to say what I was going to say. Go ahead.
And Alpha Japan, I believe, would get quickly renamed. It would have that first show under the name that it would be better known as Battle Arts.
Yes. So they do run a show January 13th in Korakuen Hall that Cage Match has listed as Alpha Japan Promotion. It's the only listing for Alpha Japan Promotion. And I would like to track this show down maybe for our next episode, because the semi-main event is Super Delvin and Taka Michinoku versus Hoshikawa and the Great Sasuke. And the main event is Funaki and Ishikawa versus Ikeda and Katsumi Osuna, which, if I'm going to watch shoot style wrestling, I would kind of prefer those 4 guys be involved. So that is an interesting looking card. Then yes, this would very quickly become Battle Arts. And as odd as it might sound to anybody that isn't familiar with the Michinoku Pro relationship with Battle Arts, we're going to be talking about Battle Arts for quite a bit, especially in 1996.
Yep. But by the end of those days, we'll have the list of all the promotions in the order of which they will do this. And if we did this like in a bar graph, it would be a really kind of interesting looking bar graph. But we're getting into a point where we're going to have a lot of battling detectives. That's for sure.
All right. So up to this point in the episode, just to regroup here, we've talked about Tiger Mask coming into Michinoku Pro. We've talked about the history of Kato Kung Lee. We've only talked about one Michinoku Pro show so far, and we've talked about Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi. We have to take at this point, before we get back to Michinoku Pro, because I really want to talk about the finals of the Tag League and the other match on that show that aired. Later, we'll get to some more Michinoku Pro and some FMW, but we have to take perhaps our weirdest detour in the history of those days of Michinoku Pro Retrospective podcast. Mike, are you ready to talk about Dennis Corluzzo in ECW for a second?
Yes, and for future reference, you could peg those days episode 12 to whenever Joe gets back to November and gets to this point in 1995, because we're going to cross the streams right now.
Yes, we are eating Joe Lanza's lunch. I do apologize, but again, like, specifically with the career of Jinsei Shinzaki, he's an odd one to peg down for what exactly I want to do with him in this series and what I want to cover from him in this series, because we don't talk a lot about his WWF stuff. When he returns to Japan and is doing a lot of FMW and a lot of All Japan, I don't plan on talking about a lot of it. But there is an NWA New Jersey show from November 18th, 1995. And we will go to the Observer from the 27th of that month to break down what happened here. As Dave writes, Sabu returned to the ECW arena in an unannounced match on November 18th, beating Hack Myers in a move that has a number of political ramifications. Sabu was introduced earlier in the show as Paul Heyman came out and said that he had a surprise for the fans. It was going to turn out the lights, and said that there would be no fire and no fire extinguishers in this surprise. When the lights came back on, Sabu was in the ring pointing to the ceiling, and the crowd was chanting "Thank you" as Sabu and Heyman hugged in the ring. According to Heyman, Sabu and Heyman reached a deal on November 1st for Sabu to appear only on the November 18th show, but Heyman wanted to keep it as a surprise. The two agreed for Sabu to work the only one show, which at press time is all that had been officially agreed to, although there is obviously a good chance Sabu will be back as a regular. The results of this surprise were numerous. Sabu had been working with WCW, although to the best of our knowledge, never signed the contract that had been offered to him. WCW had been upset with Sabu for numerous reasons, such as him brawling out of the ring more than they wanted him to and going longer than scheduled in some television matches. In addition, the Sheik wasn't supposed to throw fire at the pay-per-view show, and it caught everyone at WCW by surprise. Sabu was unhappy of being a mid-card performer, and those in the WWF say he insisted on not having his weight announced because it was the belief that it would make him categorized as a junior heavyweight, and that meant that he couldn't work on top. WCW allows its wrestlers to work indie shows provided they don't work for WWF, SMW, and ECW, which are considered as enemy promotions. It was no secret within the company that the wrestlers and booking committee, while admitting to his guts and work ethic, thought that he was a poor worker, which is why they kept his matches short. Sabu working the ECW date, particularly since it was kept a secret from WCW management, put himself in a tenuous position. Sabu, who had left for a Japan tour at press time and wasn't able to be reached, had told another reporter before leaving that he called up Bischoff on November 20th, and Bischoff told him he was too busy to talk with him at the time. He said that he watched Nitro and heard Bischoff on commentary talk about a wrestler who was no longer with the company, and he called the WCW hotline to find out who. And he called the Mike Today message, and that's how he found out that he was fired.
Oof.
Let's pause there. Eric Bischoff is just throughout history in an industry of in an industry of gross people. He is one of the grossest.
Yeah, like, geez, he has always been a slime ball. And like, we've heard the stories about like Mick Foley and Steve Austin and how he kind of dealt with this, and we've also seen him get publicly played with like Brian Pillman. But I did not know that Sabu, until we are doing the notes for the show, realized he got fired because he heard something on commentary and then called the WCW 1-900 number to find out. Jesus, that is cold. Fuck Bischoff.
I know, fuck him, he's the worst. So this will all tie into Michinoku Pro eventually, but we continue with the Sabu story, where Dave writes, while it had been reported elsewhere that Sabu had quit WCW, nobody in WCW was aware of the fact, nor was Sabu, although many were aware of the tension between the two sides and thought a split was inevitable either way. He was still booked and advertised for both the Battle Royal on the November 26th pay-per-view show, and also to face Eddie Guerrero on the 12/11 Nitro card from Charlotte. However, he probably wasn't going to make either date, since he was beginning a 3-week tour of Japan starting on November 23rd. Even stranger is the situation regarding Sabu and NWA promoter Dennis Coraluzzo. Coraluzzo had asked Sabu to work an afternoon show on November 18th in Camden, New Jersey in early October, well before Sabu and Devon Storm tore the house down on October 28th. Sabu turned down the date in early October, claiming a booking in San Bernardino, California. There was an indie show in San Bernardino that night, Dave notes. According to Coraluzzo, on November 13th, Sabu called him up and said that either the show itself had been canceled in California, or that Sabu had canceled the San Bernardino date because New Japan booked him for the week, but then canceled the shows that week, presumably because the Heisei Ishingun New Japan tour had been canceled. He told Coraluzzo he would fly himself in to work the Camden show and pay for his hotel room. The two agreed on Sabu to work for less than his usual price because most of the local publicity had been done without Sabu's name. But since Coraluzzo had gotten the clearance from the WWF to use Hakushi on the show, he figured that he could get the word around in 5 days of a Sabu versus Hakushi match, and it would draw in some extra fans. Because WWF initially freaked out about a supposed WCW versus WWF matchup and wanted it stopped, but then relented since it was to keep good relations with all promoters. Coraluzzo had to work a DQ finish because WWF insisted Hakushi not do a job to a WCW wrestler, and Sabu was the one that Coraluzzo wanted to push. At the show, they shot an angle to lead to a future Sabu versus Devon Storm match on Coraluzzo shows in December when Storm interfered for the DQ and put Sabu then Sabu put Storm and his manager through a table. So we get this very, very rare match. We'll stop there in the notes. Dave continues to write about the situation between Sabu and Heyman, but that is stuff that's been covered on Between the Sheets before. We have this very rare match where a WWF guy who is on his way out of that company to go back to Michinoku Pro guy, is on his way out of that company to go work Michinoku Pro, is wrestling an ex-WCW guy, soon-to-be ECW guy, who has been with New Japan for the entire year and also has a pre-existing relationship with both FMW and Michinoku Pro. Politically speaking, this is one of the weirdest matches in the history of wrestling.
And the wild thing is that the match is exactly kind of what you would expect when 1995 Sabu would face 1995 Hakushi with all the trappings of 1995 indies. You know, like I have not watched a ton of like main or at least major US indies from 1995. I have watched plenty of 1995 ECW, but it really felt like the 1995 indie experience going on with the show.
Yeah, it's a strange match in that it's Sabu versus Hakushi, and there's a world in which that match exists, and it's a violent slugfest that keeps us entertained from start to finish. This, however, is the U.S. indie version of that match where it was not a big house. It was the first 11 minutes of this match are clean wrestling, and it's Sabu doing clean wrestling. It's very, very strange. It's not really until they go to the floor, and then very soon after that is when Storm, and I believe it was Chris Candido, run in.
Yeah, it was Candido.
I was in my head. I've got Candido on my notes. I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't him. But no, Chris Candido is the only person who ever looked like Chris Candido. It was him. So, it's a pretty meandering match up until about the 11-minute mark when they go to the floor. And that's when Hakushi does a big Irish whip on Sabu into a row of chairs, and Sabu takes a bump like only he can. And once they start brawling for the 2 or 3 minutes that it exists before the DQ, it's a pretty interesting match. But Hakushi versus Sabu is one of the many, many Sabu dream matches that unfortunately just does not live up to the hype. This is one of those matches that on paper is quite exciting. I kind of think it's worth watching just for the weirdness of it all, but it is not a great match.
No. It's also I'm a firm belief that like I'm a whole pig wrestling fan outside of WWE and stuff like that. And this is the kind of thing that it's worth consuming, if only to like reset your system towards other things. So you're like, okay, you see this match and you go like, okay, now I know what like a Hakushi great match is, because this is not a great Hakushi match, and this is not a great televised experience. It's like 240 by 180 video that's stretched out. You have a random guy who somehow like acquired the tape from Dennis Coraluzzo, who put it up on his YouTube doing really hack commentary. The best part for me really was Chris Candido out of nowhere gets back body drop by Hakushi through a table. Like, that was the best part of it for me, because I love Chris Candido.
Yes, no, Candido's awesome. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, indie wrestling booking would tell you that Coraluzzo probably wanted to do Sabu and Hakushi versus Candido and Devon Storm and just wasn't able to make it happen.
Yeah, you could get... Yeah, he probably wanted to do that because then you could do the schmaz, or Candido could take the fall at that point.
Exactly. It would have been politically advantageous for them to have done a tag match. And I think that's something that's evolved as time has gone on, is that
right.
I think indie promoters have gotten a little bit smarter about what they can and can't do, and maybe what leads to a clean finish and what doesn't. But Again,
and to be
it's
fair to Coraluzzo, he is a promoter for like about 25 years.
Mhm.
And he manages to exist through the Attitude Era, like from like the WWF pop and all of that. And he like kind of like wages like a certain kind of way through pro wrestling. Like he is an ancillary figure at best for our story, but like you know, he had 5 days, and I imagine he was going to all like the 1-900 like indie tip lines and going like, hey, Hakushi versus Sabu is happening. And at least if you're in New Jersey, like I was trying to see if I could find Lance of this entire show. Like I didn't want to bug Lance and say like, hey, were you at this show, just in case, because it did feel like something that Teenage Lance would have been all about.
it's just such an interesting match from the perspective again of WCW wrestler leaving for ECW, WWF wrestler leaving for Michinoku Pro, also Sabu at this point. I mean, 1995, Sabu splits from ECW. I mean, he's a pushed New Japan wrestler for that entire year. I mean, he's coming off of a singles match with Hamada like right before this or right after this. I forget the timeline if it's the week before or the week after, but he is UWA World Junior Champion. So a week after that match, it's November 23rd, 1995, he beats Hamada for the World Junior title, and then he would lose it to El Samurai. But this is the height of Sabu in New Japan, and he's wrestling a Michinoku Pro guy who would become an FMW guy, and Sabu had all of his history there already. I can't think of another match that would have had that many ramifications.
And you had the smarks in the crowd chanting Shinzaki as he came out.
That's right. That's right. So
it's a lot of things
of the smarks that were there, a lighthouse. I'm sure Coraluzzo would have liked a few more people in that gymnasium.
Yeah. I wonder, given the amount of money that was thrown around, Coraluzzo is dropping these numbers that we're not going to go through, is because he feels like he took a bath on Sabu that night.
And that's Sabu working at less than his usual rate, which I would imagine his rate at this time for an indie wrestler is pretty astronomical. But nevertheless, a fascinating, just historical anecdote, and one of those weird things that Michinoku Pro got wrapped up in. In the chronological order of our timeline, then there would be that Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi show the next day. We talked about that. PWFG would go away, but Dave notes in the November 20th, 1995 Observer that Gaea Japan and Michinoku Pro have a working agreement now, with the Joshi promotion sending 6 rookie women to work Michinoku Pro opening matches to gain experience. And they would also be working on the 12-17 show in Osaka with Michinoku Pro. He also notes that Hayabusa and the Great Sasuke will form a tag team on the 12-21 FMW card in Yokohama, which we will end our episode with. But Mike, we are back in Michinoku Pro proper to talk about the November 23rd show in Iwate, the finals of that year's Michinoku Pro Tag League.
Yeah, that's right. This is a different kind of production than Gaora, even though it does have Shimizu on the call here. I think this comes from a later to be aired like local TV. We get clips from the tour, and that at this point is very clear that Funaki and Michinoku are the dream chasers at this point. And the production feels a lot better kind of at this point in this building. This is the building in Marioka that they would run in 1993. They do kind of like a quick history of the promotion. That's why I think it was kind of like a local TV thing, going through some events throughout the history, Mockland, Fukuman Mass League, and then they show Chigusa Nagayo, of course, the head of Gaia Women's, as the commentator, and we go to the show. They skip Hanzo Nakajima versus Nahiro Hoshikawa, and we start off the show with Chiako Nakashima, Maeda Sakamura, and Toshi Sato versus Chihiro Nakano, Sonoko Kato, and Toshi Uematsu in a joined-in progress match that was only really used so that Shimizu and the other commentator could interview Nagayo.
Yes, I would concur with that. It's a match that barely exists as is.
Speaking of a match that sadly exists and exists a whole lot, Wellington Wilkins Jr. versus Yone Genshin. This is the standard Wellington Wilkins Jr. versus Yone Genshin show. The one thing I will add, Yone, who was teaming with the Convict throughout this tour, has a great look. He is wearing Convict style face paint and a full mohawk. It is a look that Yone Genshin should have stuck to. And this pretty quickly went into the Crown Brawl. and you had a just like repeated missed moonsaults from Yone Genjin, and then you get the second crowd brawl, double count out. It is what it is with these guys. Like we say what their matches are, but essentially it's a great live show match that does not come across on tape in under 2026 eyes. It is what it is, but the two of them fall off the balcony in Marioka to end this portion before we get probably the best hand cart trip ever done at this point of the promotion.
It's just, it eats up such a shocking amount of TV time
so
for
much
what
time.
it is. It's just
it just
crazy.
drains you.
And that is relevant on the December show that we have coming up next too.
Oh
is
my
where,
God.
And I guess, I mean, this is the struggle of this promotion is it's interesting that Toryumon they never had this type of deal on their cards, because there are some Toryumon shows, I mean, really through until T2P is fully integrated into that roster. I mean, a lot of the T2P shows are 5 matches. Some of them are 4-match cards. And a lot of these Michinoku Pro shows are 4-match or 5-match cards, with that 5th match being this really elongated comedy match. And I guess it's better than, I mean, let me pull up the full card here now, just because I'm curious to see what we didn't get, because
I would like to see the entire women's tag, to be honest.
I would have liked to have seen the women's tag. That would have been interesting. 1995 Tang Lee, Kato Kung Lee, and Great Sasuke. So this show, I mean, yeah, I mean, okay, so I am going to take back what I said, because the opening match was a 16-minute Hanzo Nakajima versus Hoshikawa match, and I would have much rather seen that than a 14-minute Wellington Wilkins Jr. and Yone Genjin match, which there was a little bit of Taka versus Tiger Mask that was cut, and there was a little bit of the Tag League Finals that was cut, and man, do I feel like we got all 14 minutes and 41 seconds of Wilkins Jr. versus Yone Genjin.
God, it always feels like it is. And the funny thing is that this cut and this version of this has probably case. I might revive the previews if the storms don't get too bad tonight after a while I'm editing, because it has Yone Genjin doing alcohol ads that are actually pretty hilarious. It's the best use of Yone Genjin so far is in these commercials.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to connect with one of these, but it has not happened yet, and I fear it's not going to happen for many, many years.
And I think it's Wilkins that really is the drag on it, not Genjin, because we've seen Genjin in other stuff, and he's perfectly fine.
And I kind of like, the rare instance where we've seen some of those Wilkins squash matches where he's wrestling somebody that isn't Genjin. It's funny that these guys made a career out of wrestling one another when they are the least interesting when they're wrestling one another.
Oh, yeah, absolutely so. Absolutely so. But fortunately, then, building off of that match in Akita, we have, for the first time, Taka Michinoku versus Tiger Mask 1-on-1 in case. Absolutely adore this. This is like one of the few matches on this episode that I went notebook for. I was 4 stars flat on it. And Taka Michinoku is just a sheer piranha in this match. And just an absolute fucking dick to Tiger Mask 4, who, I mean, we have to put in context, 2 months into pro wrestling, and we're not having the situation where we were with Shiryu, where we're kind of tapping our feet, waiting for him to come online. Taka 93, waiting for him to come online. Nanawa, up until really the last few months coming online. Tiger Mask 4 was ready to go from the jump. And I don't think we recognize that as this guy's turn is finish up his career in 2026.
No, I think one of the things that this podcast will do is, I think you and I specifically are going to come away with a much different version of the Tiger Mask 4 legacy than some other people, because he's working Michinoku Pro, I think through 2000, when I sort of have the cutoff of this show in mind, but I know he's there in 99 because he wrestles Mochizuki in a singles match in 1999. So he's there pretty much the entire time, and he's good from the jump, like you said. I mean, this is a guy who, in 1996, we see him thrown into those big multi-man matches, and he holds his own. I would imagine, and I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine the company really starts to lean on him in 97, 98, 99. But yeah, he shows up, and you're right. I don't know if we give him credit, given how long and at times overpushed he's been in his career, for being good immediately. Because Taka's great, and I want to talk about Taka specifically, but Tiger Mask is really good. And I would like to know when he started training. If he debuts in the summer of 1995, I would like to know when that process started. And I don't think we've ever gotten an answer on that.
Yeah, and if anyone's getting able to sit down with TM4 before it's all said and done, please, that is something that I think that is really worth getting into, is his exact beginning with Sayama. I think he did some Mexico. That's the only kind of thing that I'm aware of it. But like his first tope in this match, it's like violent in a way. He also like pivots his body in a certain fashion that is just really strong, and he goes for Taka's arm pretty strongly early. But the real story of this match is that Taka Michinoku at this point is a assassin who is basically devoted to just absolutely ruining this guy's kind of existence. Great performance in Tiger Mask 4. Michinoku wins with a Michinoku driver that he pulls him up, and then he hits a Black Tiger bomb to finish it. What a great prick he is. And my last note is, God, 1995 Taka Michinoku rocks.
Just a few other things that I liked from this match. You know, I think the thing that really sticks out here is, in the same way that I think watching this with 1995 eyes, the speed in which they were working and the moves they did would have been the mind-blowing thing. Watching this with 2026 eyes, it is the foundational ability that these guys possess. It's the crispness and the snap to everything they do that just feels like a foreign concept in 2026. There's nobody working with the speed, yet the grace of somebody like Taka Michinoku. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't feel like Tiger Mask is that far behind Taka, at least in the context of this match. So that is what really jumped out to me here. It's a little bit like watching some of those mid-2000s Ring of Honor matches where just the basics are so strong before the match gets elevated to a high level that feel like maybe that sort of stuff is missing from modern wrestling. Here, I think that is really, really noticeable. At one point, Taka does a springboard knee to the back of Tiger Mask's head, and he gets booed so viciously when he gets up to his feet, and he revels in those boos. That is so great to see. My favorite two spots of the match: Tiger Mask goes for a drop kick off the top rope. Taka drop kicks him out of midair, and before he does the Spaceman Plancha, which he nails, and he gets so much air and it looks so great. When you watch this match, if you haven't seen it yet, Taka kicks Tiger Mask out of the air. Taka kind of goes face first to the mat. Tiger Mask rolls to the floor. Watch the way that Taka darts his eyes around the ring and around the floor to try to figure out where Tiger Mask is before he then hits the ropes and does a Spaceman Plancha. It's one of those very small things, but it's one of those things that feels like it's a little bit lost in modern wrestling, where he kicks a guy out of midair. You don't know where that guy is going to bounce to. You don't know where he's going to go. And Taka is able to sort of dart his eyes around and then bounce off the ropes, hit the Spaceman Plancha. The other great thing is Tiger Mask goes for a Sasuke special, and Taka intercepts him with a forearm shiver to the head, and then hits a springboard dropkick. Yes. Oh my God. It's so great. And then he hits a springboard dropkick to the back of Tiger Mask's head. It is, I think one of the spots in wrestling that where there's such a fine line between it looking absolutely amazing and really, really choreographed is anytime that a tope suicida is cut off with a forearm or an elbow or a kick or something, because a lot of the time the guy doing the dive is going to have to slow down to such a degree to get hit that it looks ineffective. It looks dumb. It's a spot that I would rather not see. The way they shoot it and the way Taka times this, you think Tiger Mask is going to hit this Sasuke special until Taka appears, and boy, does he clean his clock when Tiger Mask gets ready to launch. It is such an incredible spot.
Yeah, no, and these two, they just have the timing down, like from the jump. Like that's the thing that I think is like comically absurd, is the level of precision that's coming from a guy who's getting elevated and a guy who's only been wrestling essentially for 2 months.
But it's not an accident. I mean, we see this with Dragon Gate sometimes, but it's not an accident that they're putting him with Taka. I mean, you can't put him with Nanawa. I think it would have been very strange to have put him with Delphin. You're not in a position where Hoshikawa or Nakajima are in positions to carry somebody at this point. I mean, I'm curious to see if we're ever going to get to a point where they can carry anybody. You're not going to put him with Sasuke as an opponent. So you look at the roster, and unless you wanted Tiger Mask to be fluent in 80s lucha, which would have been cool, and have him wrestle Soler and Kendo all the time, Taka's the guy that you got to go with, and Taka was the right man for the job.
Absolutely. So, and it's kind of nice to kind of have that and then get one of those like 1980s lucha guys in your main event for the Tabi finals. It is the great Sasuke along with Kato Kung Lee versus the Delphin Core Supremo Super Delphin along with Grand Nanawa.
I don't know about you, but I love this match.
I think like Delphin, it does not have a good episode over this time period. I don't think Delphin was necessarily doing the strongest stuff, and I think that him and Nanawa really kind of get to a point where they're being comedy heels, and it doesn't necessarily start here, but by the end of the year, they're like out and out comedy heels in some ways, and it's just kind of not what I want from those two guys, and maybe that has me a little bit down on this, but Kato Kung Lee is just so much fun throughout this. It's just you have like what I feel like is him doing this kind of performance, and then you get Delphin a little bit off. Nanawa, he's good, but it's not one of his strongest performances. And maybe I am the one a little bit out to lunch. I thought that Tiger Mask 4 versus Taka Michinoku was head and shoulders better than this.
Okay, interesting. I have them at the exact same rating. I have them both at 3 3/4. Just one thing I've learned about me is that I just enjoy a junior heavyweight tag league finals more than the average man. There's just a certain type of wrestling that is inhabited in this specific environment that I really, really enjoy. But I felt like the contrast of Delphin and Nanawa compared to what Sasuke and Kato Kung Lee were doing was really interesting. And like I mentioned earlier, it's an excellent showcase for Kato Kung Lee in terms of doing a style of wrestling that I just don't feel is prevalent anymore and that I felt that he excelled in. So I liked the way that especially he and Delphin worked together in this match. I also thought, while I think we both agree now that Sasuke's magnum opus is likely the work that he did throughout the entire 1995 Master League Tour, and the Stevie J match was what it was, weird opponent, weird match, weird building. I thought Sasuke was excellent in this match. I thought this was one of the better individual wrestling performances that I've seen from Sasuke so far.
Yeah, and I think Sasuke had a willing partner in Nanawa throughout most of that. And I feel like that really, like, my disappointment in this match isn't Sasuke, it isn't Kung Lee, it isn't Nanawa. I think Delphin just kind of took the night off.
I would feel that way about Delphin matches in the future, but I enjoyed this. I enjoyed Delphin's orange and purple gear. It was nice to see him back in not that match league gear. I thought he looked awesome on this card.
Oh, I love his shoulder pads that are dolphins on it. Like, well, we're going to talk in a moment about some grown-up Nanawa gear too. Like both of these two guys, I feel like that a big issue for Delphin is that he was probably going to go face already in this year, and he's kind of just sticking around doing what entertains himself, and that's a problem I have with his legacy ultimately.
Yeah, it's strange that, 1995, but again, I wonder what happens if Sato doesn't get hurt at the start of the year, because it does seem like a lot of parts are moving around Delphin with the booking of this promotion, but Delphin himself isn't necessarily a big spoke in the wheel in 1995. He's large. It feels like his stories have been told in 93 and his stories have been told in 94. And maybe it's just the benefit of hindsight in knowing what's coming in 96 with him. But 95, it's like, okay, well, they got to put the UWF title back on him. And then he holds that. And we don't, unfortunately, we don't get the Solaire match or the Kato Kung Lee match. So it's hard to define the legacy of that title run. And then by the end of the year, I mean, it makes sense. The top heels in the finals of the tag league. But I do feel like the top heel here was overshadowed by the Sasuke Kato Kung Lee Dream Team, which rocks. I mean, this is to me, this is great booking to have Kato Kung Lee, who represented a style of martial arts appreciation in Mexico alongside Kung Fu and alongside Black Man, with a gimmick that would then be heightened by Octagon. And Sasuke's character is mostly based on that lineage of guys. And now they team together and they win the tag league. And I thought they were a great team with one another.
Yeah, and I feel like that in a way that Sasuke, because he ends up teaming with Kendo a whole lot throughout their times there, he is kind of the comfortable kind of person, and it makes sense, like him as the totem of the promotion to end up teaming with these like kind of big outsiders and at least identifying him. I mean, throughout the year, you identify him with Dos Caras, you identify him with Kendo. Like it's good PR to also have Sasuke teaming with these guys as well.
Yeah, it feels like a legacy defining year for Sasuke, which is an interesting thing where I think maybe wrestlers are just, they wrestle too long now to fully get the benefit of this, to fully reap those rewards. But 1994 is Sasuke setting himself apart from his contemporaries and proving that he's on the level of Liger and on the level of Delphin and could be a top guy in a major promotion. And then you're right, 1995 is a year where he's largely working with legends and getting their seal of approval. And I do think that's a really interesting thing. And I'd have to sit down, if I went through the AEW roster, I'd have to really figure out what that would look like in terms of a contemporary comparison. I don't even know. I don't even think it would be possible now in Dragon Gate. Like you would almost have to take Ryoya Tanaka. We're recording this in March of 2026. You'd have to take Ryoya Tanaka and have him team with Yamato, but Tanaka gets all of the falls and Yamato is just gesturing it like, hey, how about this guy? Hey, how about this guy? Hey, how about this guy for an entire calendar year? That almost feels like the closest that modern day Dragon Gate could get to this.
Yeah, and like think about like AEW things, like it would have had to been if Danielson basically would have just teamed with Yuta the entire time, right? Like that's what it would have been.
Yeah, that's a good comp.
But it's interesting, like the Futari Tabi finals. It's a tournament that as we're dealing with like the third iteration of Case, I still don't feel like I have a good handle on where it kind of ranks in within the calendar year. Like it's treated like a important thing, but we only really see the finals, and Fukumen shows up, and Fukumen's not a constant thing. But Fukumen does feel like that it's instantly much more important than it. And I still kind of feel a little bit dissatisfied just for the fact that we saw those clips at top. And man, I would have loved to see Dream Chasers versus Kato Kung Lee and Sasuke. That would have been something I've been real interested in. I would love seeing Dream Chasers versus Delphin Core. Like that would have been a whole lot there with it, but it does kind of lead me a little bit not dissatisfied, but kind of wanting more coming out of this show.
I really wish we had more tag league footage from every year. I don't really think it's until the late 90s where they dedicate a ton of TV time to an entire tag league tour, which is a bummer because I'm really into this concept and I was really into these teams. And I loved the finals of this tournament. I love the Taka versus Tiger Mask stuff. When you go through and look at the cards for October and November of 1995, Michinoku Pro was in a very interesting place where they feel a little bit more grown up. There's very clear character development, and it's just a matter of we don't get anything from October on tape, and we barely get anything from November on tape. But it's a bummer because these cards now look really, really good.
And then there's so much December that's on tape. There are full episodes of Champ Forum that we're not covering. It becomes like a real glut of things. Like their TV imbalance, it gets better with Samurai, and that is something that when we talk about at the end of the episode, we'll talk about how those days will, like scheduling wise, will be a little bit different. Not like release different, but just how we're covering changes a little bit. It's just it's consistently an uneven production promotion, and the real shame is that 1995 is one of their most active years, and we don't get a consistent coverage of it to the extent that this is the only thing we have from their tag league.
Very much so. Going on from there in the timeline, we move on to the 1995 Super J Cup, which, Mike, I don't know how entirely you want to tackle this. I do want to go through the notes of what Dave had leading up to the tournament at the very least, which is that on October 9th of 1995, in The Observer, Dave notes that, without a doubt, one of the greatest pro wrestling shows in history was the Super Junior Cup, a one-night tournament held on April 16th, 1994 at Tokyo Sumo Hall. The tournament brought together lighter weight wrestlers from 7 promotions, WAR hosting WAR, New Japan, AAA, Social Pro Wrestling Federation, FMW, EMLL, and Michinoku Pro. The result was a series of matches, the level of which has rarely been approached on one show, including the performance of a lifetime by Sasuke, who made himself an international name by doing a 4.5, a 4 3/4, and a 5-star match in succession against Samurai, Liger, and Pegasus, respectively. Pegasus was the first winner, beating Sasuke in the finals. With Liger, who put the tournament together for New Japan, out of action during the spring with an injury, no one-night tournament was held, although in June and July, New Japan held a round-robin tournament over a 3-week period, which was once again won by Pegasus, although they didn't include wrestlers from other groups. It was announced this week that Ultimo Dragon and WAR would be putting on the second tournament in mid-December at Sumo Hall. Dragon, who gained a lot of heat with the New Japan office when he turned down the invite to appear in the first tournament, had a meeting with Liger on September 30th, and it was announced that WAR, New Japan, FMW, and Michinoku Pro would combine forces for the tournament with a date to be announced in the coming weeks. I think it's really interesting, Dave notes here, that Dragon got heat with New Japan for not being in the first J-Cup.
Well, you should have booked Ultimo Dragon to the finals. Dragon's not showing up to drop out after one round.
No, I mean, that was... the fascinating part about that tournament is the fact that they were able to pull it off, but that was the issue with Sabu, that was the issue with Hamada, and that was the issue with Ultimo Dragon, was they all did not want to do anything but win that tournament.
Right. And I think for like someone like Ultimo now being able and willing to do this, like he sees the tournament, he sees that that only good kind of came out of it, and ultimately I think his willingness to kind of do this like so abruptly and do it under WAR, where he kind of was doing some booking at that time, is him admitting that he would never admit it, but he probably is going like, well, I wasn't a part of the first one, and I saw how that went for Sasuke and their own little rivalry between the two of them, that he's definitely going to book it himself, and then he's going to announce his field, and it's very interesting his field that he would announce, Case.
So we get the note in the following, I'm sorry, this is actually not the following week Observer. This is the October 16th Observer, that the second annual J-Cup will be held on 12/13 in Tokyo Sumo Hall. They've already announced Ultimo Dragon, Jushin Thunder Liger, Shinjiro Otani, and Shoichi Funaki representing Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi. Dragon, who is putting together this tournament, which means likely wrestlers from EMLL in Mexico, has meetings scheduled with Michinoku Pro, FMW, IWA, Wrestle Dream Factory, and even All Japan to book top names. Dave would continue a month later. This is the November 27th Observer. Ultimo Dragon announced on November 19th that the Super J-Cup on 12/13 would feature Grand Nanawa and Hanzo Nakajima from Michinoku Pro, so no Sasuke, Delphin, or Taka, which hurts the show. Again, Dave going back to, you got to have those guys in this tournament to have a good card. Plus the already announced Ultimo Dragon, and now Lionheart, Gato, Jushin Thunder Liger, Shinjiro Otani, and El Samurai. Rey Mysterio Jr. will face Psychosis in a singles match, but it won't be a part of the tournament. Dragon believes WAR can make Mysterio Jr. into an attraction if protected using the right opponents, but the tournament he'd have to do a job, and he is actually too light even against some of the junior heavyweight wrestlers like Liger to not be exposed in that sense, and they want to protect him so that he gets over first. I feel like that story has been told a lot throughout history, that people didn't really buy into Rey Jr. as an attraction in Mexico or America or Japan. And yet the legacy of the 95 J-Cup is Rey Jr. versus Psychosis.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing as I was getting into like deep Japanese wrestling that I knew about the second J-Cup was that it happened. It wasn't in New Japan, and really everyone talked about Rey Mysterio Jr. and Psychosis.
Yeah, so from there, Dave just goes on to list out the lineup, which we would get an appearance from Dos Caras. We would get an appearance from Masaki Mochizuki. Those were new names that were added to the fold. And so we have the 1995 J-Cup, which is not the 1994 J-Cup, but it is, I think, just a really fascinating slice of where Japanese wrestling was at this current time. Do you remember the first time that you saw this tournament?
I don't think I had seen the tournament in full up until I was doing like a Masaki Mochizuki deep dive of his time before Toryumon. Like that was the time, and it really was for me like getting, and I see some of the Ultimo matches throughout. I would see the Ultimo match there, but really for me, like I piecemealed this tournament together just because it just never really had everything that the 94 did. And I feel like for a lot of people, it probably was not watching this tournament in bulk, but it might have been going like, okay, I know Chris Jericho, so I'm going to watch Chris Jericho versus this Hanzo Nakajima guy. And I feel like that's how this tournament got consumed.
I think that's a very good point. I think you're right. I know that, when we talked about the 94 J Cup, I made the point that I had never seen that show all the way through until we did it for this podcast, whereas the
Yeah, I think
95
there's
J Cup.
matches of this tournament I have not watched still. Yeah.
See, that's interesting because the 95 one is the one that I know. Like I've seen Nanawa versus Damien, and I've gone all the way through. Really the only match that in my head I couldn't picture, because Dave starts breaking down the brackets and gets most of the booking largely correct. I mean, I'm sure that I would have seen Benoit versus Jericho at some point because that's a quarterfinal match.
Yeah.
I have zero memory of that. And that's the type of thing that I know I've seen because I've watched this entire show all the way through. But that is the one match that, like, I'm really drawing a blank on because I'm charmed by Gato versus Dos Caras and how weird that match is. I'm charmed by Ultimo versus Otani and how good that match is, and Otani versus Mochizuki in the opening round too. I remember Liger versus Gato, and I obviously remember Ray versus Psychosis. This is the tournament to me that it's nowhere near as good as 94, but I do just like all of the names that appeared on this show appearing on the same card together. I think it's a very cool thing.
This is going to be a bad job for me because I should have researched this before I say this. I'm fairly certain that the first matches I saw from this tournament were on a Chris Benoit DVD that WWE got the rights for, like the Chris Jericho match.
Oh, interesting. Would that have been the Benoit Hard Knocks DVD?
Yeah, I think it was that DVD.
Let me see.
Do you have that DVD on you?
No, I don't. I was gonna use Google. I do not. I don't have Benoit Hard Knocks sitting next to me.
But I mean, that's a DVD you can't really sell or display in polite company, but you might have keep it in your collection. Because let me see, Hard Knocks full content listing for this.
So they've got Liger versus Benoit from 1990, Black Tiger versus Benoit from 1994 J Cup, and Benoit versus Sasuke from 1994 J Cup as well. They don't appear to have a 1995 J Cup match on this show, but I did not realize that they had any of the Japan matches. That's really interesting to me.
That definitely, from when I say never before the show that we did on the 94 J Cup, I watched all the 94 J Cup through. I knew I definitely watched those three matches because I had that DVD. And
do they do English dubbed commentary?
I think no. They I'm looking at the lineup here. They have two commentary tracks, one Cole and Taz, the other Benoit Malenko and Todd Grisham for those three matches.
Wow, I'm gonna have to hunt that down. I had no idea those existed. That's really interesting.
Maybe it was the Jericho DVD.
No, well, I mean, yeah. Well, I think God, he's got a few. I don't know which one that would be.
I'm gonna look this up myself for it. You don't gotta chase.
Please do.
Down.
No, that's very intriguing to me. But in terms of the 95 J Cup, you get the opening match of Nanawa versus Damien. You also get, I think, what has now become a pretty infamous match in this tournament, the Otani versus Mochizuki Slugfest, which is very funny looking back at the way Mochizuki's treated in this tournament, given the career that he would have. You have a first-round match of Ultimo Dragon versus Shoshi Funaki, and you have Lionheart versus Hanzo Nakajima. Mike, the one match that I want to talk about from this show is the Liger versus Grand Nanawa match from the quarterfinals, which is a thrilling effort from Grand Nanawa, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's the kind of performance that if you want to draw a line to Nanawa versus Delphin and Sasuke from Fukuman Mask League, this is definitely in that lane. I think that if this match went 4 minutes longer or 5 minutes longer, it could have been my 1995 Michinoku Pro Match of the Year. Nanawa went for it. You get him jumping. You get him now. Like it's become a trope that you jump Liger at the J Cup after High Boosted it in '94, but this time he did Nanawa jumping him, kicking him off kicking him on the turnbuckle, doing a Hurricane Rana, and then a Spaceman Tope, and then followed by the Nanawa bomb immediately. In case he's 19, we're finally he is a grown man doing some grown man pro wrestling in this first 2 minutes of this match.
It's one of the things that I think Liger possesses a very unique skill of, which is just his ability to find the right way to elevate guys. And you see it in 94 with Hayabusa, you see it in 94 with even to some degree Sasuke, but the way that he's able to draw everybody in to where you're watching this match going, okay, I know Liger's in the finals, but I'm watching this and I'm fully believing that Nanawa has a shot of beating Liger right now. It is one of the things that makes him an all-time great. And I think the fact that Liger has so many of these throughout the years, when you go through the J Cups and you go through just him as an outsider and the work that he would do in Osaka Pro and the work that he would do in Noah, and then all of the guys that he helped elevate. I mean, the work that he did with Eita in 2016, like there's just a million of these matches where maybe they don't have the match of their life with Liger in terms of okay, this is the best thing they ever did. This is the highest notebook rating I gave it. But so many guys throughout history have this very career defining performance against Liger in the same way that so many of those guys have it against Bryan Danielson, in the same way that so many Dragon Gate guys have their best match against Masaki Mochizuki, in the same way that so many contemporary wrestlers have the best match of their life against Will Ospreay because he's able to elevate them in a certain way. Liger is the king of that. And it's really interesting to watch Nanawa, who, I mean, God, he would have been so out of place in the 94 J Cup, but I think just through reps and getting better, has a very good in-ring year in 1995 and ends the year with a stellar near notebook match against Liger.
Yeah, you give this 5 more minutes and it's notebook. And
yeah,
it's
very, very close as is.
Yeah, and it's really cool, like the idea that Liger being so he's always so giving in these kind of matches. He frames it in a way that basically Nanawa unloads the gas tank on him pretty much immediately, and Liger counters that by just being a prick, like the way you would see him go up against Sasuke in '94. There's a gnarly German, and after he unloads his tank, Liger just goes like, "All right, you did what you could, but now I'm here to put you away." And he gets him with the brainbuster in just under 10 minutes. And the way that this tournament was set up was essentially okay. It ends up that Liger gets the win in the finals. He is the person who knocks out Dragon, who I think Ultimo, he was okay with his he's okay with his pride doing this. Gato advances to the final this time after defeating Wild Pegasus, so you get a little bit of a WAR win on that end. And I think that you look at this second Super J Cup, it's not considered like the way that the 99-2000 one goes, but I think the politics kind of, in a way, ruined what could have been and didn't allow it to capitalize on what happened in 1994. And I think essentially that goes down to the one guy who elected not to do the tournament in 1994, but insisted on putting it in his promotion in 1995.
Things worked out for Ultimo Dragon as they typically do. It's amazing how that works.
Oh, things always look up for that guy. Let's move on into December, because as we said, there's a lot of Michinoku in December.
There's a lot of Michinoku in December. Unfortunately, none of it is all that good, but I do want to have this note here from the Observer on December 11th of 1995. And I think it's so interesting that Dave is talking about this in December of 95, given to where it would come into fruition in 1996. It's funny, I was just looking ahead at the notes for our next episode, and there's a note in there about what Sasuke is attempting to accomplish in 1996 that ends up coming to fruition. And so rarely in wrestling do promotions have these very clear public goals that end up happening in the way that they're looking for. But on 12/11/95 in The Observer, Dave writes that Dynamite Kid, one of the true innovators of the modern style of wrestling, whose injuries became because of his innovation ended his career prematurely, will be wrestling on the 12/15 Calgary show and will be honored at the show. They are hopeful because it's a special show for Stu Hart, that the heat between Dynamite and Davey Boy, which is really bad, as on the Dynamite side, he blames Smith for deserting him after he made him, that everybody will behave there. Brad Radford is also on the show. Dean Douglas said he'd decide by the end of the week if he could make it. And Dave notes that Dynamite Kid, who at this point is only 37, has been living in England for the past few years, and that Michinoku Pro wants to bring him to Japan next year.
Hey, it would make sense for everything that this promotion is that they would try to make that play to try to get him in there for this.
And it ends up working out, I guess, in one way. They do effectively get him to Japan. Whether it worked out is a conversation for another time. We now go to December 14th, 1995. This is a full-length Michinoku Pro show that had been restored in HD on Nico Nico a few years ago from the lovely Hakata Star Lanes. It was very nice to see some HD Hakata Star Lanes footage. Mike, this is a full show, but unfortunately, I don't think it was that good of a show.
No. And a lot of this was because of you had a huge block devoted to Wellington Wilkins Jr. and Yone Genjin, and that kind of colors things with it. Going through it, the opener was Terry Boy versus Masato Yakashiji. Terry Boy, another guy who we do not see a lot of because of the Fukumen tournament and is kind of a little bit adrift without Sato here. But him versus Yakashiji is just so good at body control in this match. And he just has a certain way that the way that body slams go with Yakashiji, they just look different. And I have a question for you, Case. Does anyone do a good spinning heel kick anymore? Because Yakashiji has a couple great ones, including a springboard in this match.
Does anybody do a good spinning heel kick anymore? No, they do not. That is officially a lost move alert.
I think this goes into our Little Things Combine with Alan 4L.
Yeah, that's a move. That sounds impossible that nobody does that move anymore, but I don't think anybody does that move anymore.
No. But I thought it was a decent enough little opener. Nice to see both of them really, since they were not really featured over the last few months. They're kind of one of those guys that are kind of sitting around, and Yakashiji is at this point where you would think that in 1996 he'd be the one that's kind of they're gearing to heat up in the way that they would do for Taka in previous years.
Yeah, very much so.
The Wilkins versus Yone Genjin time limit, not time limit, a double count out goes 16 minutes. It just went for fucking ever. This is my big note that I have here. This is just boring to watch the same match happen year after year. I'm certain it's a great crowd live match in Hakata, but it doesn't hold up after 30 years. And it's just that. And then we get something we can kind of sink our teeth into, Case, as the Dream Chasers of Shoichi Funaki and Taka Michinoku face off against Tiger Mask 4 and Nahiro Hoshikawa. And we're getting some fighty Nahiro Hoshikawa in this one, Case.
Yeah, again, this is the interesting thing with Taka in this episode is he's got all the Tiger Mask stuff. He has good chemistry with Kato Kung Lee when they're in the ring together. We're going to talk about him, I think, carrying an FMW match in just a second. But you also get this other side of Taka that's on display here, where you not only have the Tiger Mask stuff again, but the real stars of this match are Taka and Hoshikawa going at it on the mat. And I think Taka bringing as much out of Hoshikawa as anybody has up to this point in his career.
Yeah, no, and Hoshikawa kind of feels like the great foil. So, Case, this is actually the first taped Dream Chasers match we have, because nothing got taped during a Tag League, even though they were a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of feels like at this point, Taka Michinoku is the one heel in the one heel member of Delphin Corps at this point, because he is just an absolute monster, just tearing apart Hoshikawa. We see Dream Chasers already developing some solid double teams with Taka's double jump knee that the crowd goes nuts for it. And Hoshikawa had a lot of really good snap, especially versus Funaki, and in a moment that I don't think Funaki was being very cooperative with. And you got to see a lot of really fun stuff here. And I felt like that Taka Michinoku and Shoichi Funaki were kind of the saviors of this episode of those days.
I completely agree. Again, this is the work that Taka's doing that is just, I think, next level. And to your point about his character, I mean, yeah, Delphin at this point has lost his edge. Nanawa at this point has lost his edge. It's almost like Taka just siphoned what they had going for them in 1994 and took it and made his own. And now in 1995, by the end of the year, I mean, we'll do year-end awards on the next episode, but it is hard to imagine somebody more consistent throughout the year than Taka was this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely so. And talking about sucking the heel from, we go to Super Delphin and Grand Nanawa versus Shiryu and AAA's Ninja Del Fuego, who reveals himself in the first minute to be a longtime friend of the show and the promotion, Kendo.
I know. Who could have seen this coming?
Yeah, and it turns into Kendo just getting the crowd keyed up and just doing crowd work. And all the power to Kendo for spending like 5 minutes just doing crowd work with Grand Nanawa. But it's not necessarily a great match when it's just all crowd work.
I will save my Kendo thoughts for our final appearance of him on this show. But this is a 24-minute match that seemed awesome in the building. But it is it's like a WWF house show match, but in Michinoku Pro. I mean,
yes.
it is
they
not,
do nothing for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it is not necessarily a fun one to watch on tape.
Delphin wins with a Dolphin clutch on Shiryu. The main event of this show, Great Sasuke makes another defense of the British Junior Commonwealth title against Hanzo Nakajima. Hanzo Nakajima somehow has his ribs taped up, and that kind of becomes the focal point as Sasuke is kind of vicious here against Nakajima, who's trying to string it together, but Hanzo Nakajima is just but at this point in 1995, he's just thoroughly lapped, and it's not a great British Commonwealth Junior Heavyweight title match.
I like the way Nakajima sells the ribs. There's a moment in the match where he goes for a flash pin and he can't hold the pin because of the rib injury, and I thought that was really interesting. But it does take a long time to get going. I thought they had a strong finishing stretch, but this is the type of match, and this is, just the unfortunate way that we have to analyze history is, if we would have gotten this in a clipped form and saw the last 6 minutes, I would have gone, man, I really, really wish we had the whole thing. But we have the whole thing, and I watched this going, I would have liked to have seen just the last 6 minutes of this match.
Yeah, just kind of a little bit of a disappointing thing, and it ends with Sasuke winning with the rounding body press. So not going for the Thunderfire powerbomb, not doing a Hurricane Rana, going for that instead. Not an interesting match, but not necessarily a great one. And we go to close here as Mr. Pogo is on the scene in Hakata Star Lanes, and he's beating the living shit out of Sasuke with the sickle. And Pogo's with FMW at this time, right? This is the kickoff for that angle. Correct?
Yeah, this is an insane angle that I feel like nobody has ever talked about before. Please walk us through this.
So after the promos, and Sasuke does a promo, and then for some reason Delphin Core comes out, does a promo, and then Sasuke's trying to do another one, and then Pogo comes down and attacks him with the fucking sickle and starts just cutting him up, throws him on the outside, grabs his paper, sets it on fire. Everyone's going like, oh shit, this is our first time in Star Lanes. We don't want to get kicked out of this building. And it's absolute mayhem. It's a great we're out of time kind of moment, but at least in my point, like with what's happening at FMW, nothing gets followed up upon.
Yeah, Pogo sets him on fire in this angle.
Yeah.
And unless I don't feel like I'm missing something. I feel like this is sort of just a standalone. They wrestle they wrestle in January of 96. So we'll talk about that on the next episode. But still, what a violent angle for something that I was not expecting at all. And that match, so help me with my Japanese geography. This is in Hakata Star Lanes in Fukuoka. They wrestle in Hokkaido. Is that relatively the same territory?
No. Hakata is Western Japan. Hokkaido is Sapporo.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. What a fascinating angle. I mean, I guess this looks awesome if a magazine is able to shoot it. I've never seen photos of this angle, so maybe it's more effective than I realize. But I'm getting ready to turn the video off, and then Pogo comes out. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And then Pogo sets him on fire. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like there's more to the story here that we don't know.
Yeah, it's just wild shit. It's just like, what are we even doing out of this? And like, there's no FMW throughout the show, so it's just abrupt and no, I don't know if Pogo was already doing a show in Hakata and that's why that worked out that way, but just ferocious. So
no, it's not. I mean, it's not written about. I'll see if I can get an update before the next episode on maybe some of the historical stuff around this, but this is just a weird angle where Pogo comes out of nowhere. He sets a guy on fire. They have a match in January that, I'm looking at it now. We'll cover this on the next episode, but it's Shunji Takano, it's Zebra and Sasuke versus Nanawa and Mr. Pogo in a street fight in the Nakajima Sports Center in Sapporo, Japan. I'm fascinated by this. We'll talk about this more in the next episode.
Yep. And that concludes that last show, at least. This one was in Hakata for them. They're already out of the territory for Tohoku, but they finish up their year in Delphin territory at the Osaka Rinkai Center. Sellout for the last date of from Lucha no Kuni, but we only get 2 matches on tape for this case. Shoichi Funaki versus Nahiro Hoshikawa, and an interesting trios main event. I think you have a note about the guy girls coming in for that show.
Just that, Dave writes in the Observer that they came in for the show and that the women did spots with men, including, Hasegawa doing a DDT to the floor on Sasuke, and that is essentially it. What is interesting to me about this match is that I did not like it that much. Ditch has it listed in his archives, which I thought was a really interesting thing to say. Let me see if I can find his write-up for this match real quick. He writes for this 6-person tag. Kendo and two of Joshi's finest don't miss a beat in yet another fun-filled multi-man Michinoku romp, though I question the wisdom of ever putting Delphin in a mixed tag, which is funny. I found this match to be really long and really not interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Delphin Core. It just does their bits with Sasuke Hasakawa kind of playing into it. There's a lot of humor about Delphin trying to romance her, but Nanawa getting kind of involved, and in a way you kind of have this happening as a way I really feel like to keep Delphin Core spinning that plate until Sato returns. And it feels like this is like one of the few matches in Michinoku Pro that I feel like is very coded for the time frame of when it is. And especially if you think about like what a 90s intergender match would be, like this is essentially kind of like this. Shimoda corpses because it's Sasuke and Kendo does his whole routine and Shimoda's corpsing on the outside. It feels like Hasegawa is kind of more up for everything, but it's just not really. It's just a weird combination that it's not like that you're having like a full fleshed like intergender 6-person tag that you would see in Japanese wrestling today, and it's a drag. It's a double swinging DDT, Hasegawa doing one on Kendo, which leads to Hasegawa doing a tope on Sasuke and a dolphin clutch on Kendo for a Delphin Core to get the win in this match in Delphin's hometown. But it's not. I liked Funaki versus Nahiro Hoshikawa a lot more than this.
The one note about the 6-person that I did like was it did remind me that had Kendo been around for peak PWG, he would be a multi-millionaire because he would have gotten signed to a major league contract just off of what he would be able to do in Reseda. That is a man that was built for the Night 3 Bola 10-man tag, if there ever was one. And that's a compliment. I mean,
just
I love
doing
Kendo.
Ken jumps.
Yeah, exactly. Just doing Ken jumps and just doing all of the things that made him him. I love Kendo. I think he's been a revelation in this footage, but oh my God, would he have killed in Reseda? It's amazing to think if he comes around 20 years later that he would be a multi-millionaire in pro wrestling because those PWG matches would have led to him signing a giant contract. As for the other match that we get on this show, Hoshikawa does a spear in the corner that misses that would have brought a tear to Ben K's eye. He goes for it with that spear and he does not connect with it, and it looked incredible.
Yeah, he also does this fucking choke spin that he turns into a slam that Funaki goes for, and it is brutal looking. It's just if this is what shoot style was all the time, I would have been much more of a evangelist for it. Funaki wins with a knee bar. This is just like a great undercard kind of thing, and it's nice to see that they picked like the best part, at least in what would ingratiate itself into Michinoku, with Sho Funaki coming on board.
Yeah, that's, one of the things that I've had an eye on since the very beginning is, especially with Hoshikawa and especially with Nakajima, but now that we have Funaki more in the fold, of just how this promotion works these shoot style guys into core Michinoku Pro stuff. And I think throughout 1995, we see them integrated more and we see them get more opportunity. I think in the case of Hoshikawa, I think he makes more of those opportunities than his counterpart. And then we'll see in 1996, Funaki really makes a name for himself there. But that's still one of those things that I have my eye on, much like in the same way that I watch these Michinoku Pro Trios matches to try to figure out the difference between a Michinoku Pro Trios match, a Toryumon Trios match, or a Dragon Gate Trios match. I think the way that Michinoku Pro handles their shoot style guys is something that, especially as we get into 96 and 97, and then the Kaientai Exodus in 98, that's what I really have my eye on is, did they squander an opportunity there? Is this an instance of, Kenta and Marufuji and Noah, where the promotion tries to invest in these guys and those guys to one degree or another fail? Is it a Tyler Black Ring of Honor situation where they're too late to pull the trigger on any of these guys? I just want to know what sort of impact they have on the business of Michinoku Pro by the time that we're done here, because it's very clear, especially in the case of Hoshikawa, that he's a phenomenal wrestler by this point.
Yeah, and getting him out of the Wilkins malaise, I think, really helps. Having someone like Funaki there to kind of pull him up out of it. I know Hoshikawa never really becomes like the full out character, but I'm interested to see how he's kind of fleshed out in comparison to guys that already know what their trajectory are.
Very much so.
And that was Michinoku's last show for 1995 to close the year out at Rinkai Sports Center and announced a sellout of 2,050 in Delphin's hometown.
That show looked packed. The Hakata Star Lane show looked packed too.
Yeah, so I mean that they close out just for like attendance thing. They're in Ishibe. That I have not seen that show. I know that there's parts of it. They get 1,100 there. Hakata Star Lanes, they get 2,000 for. They have another Hakata show that they get like 800 for. Nomura 1,216, and then Michinoku Pro closing out the year at 2,000. They finish out the year with 4 shows are well above their 500 ticket mark that they had for themselves back in '93.
We end the year revisiting our friends at FMW. Mike, real quick on this match. FMW has a big year-end show. This is in Yokohama. This is on December 21st of the year. This is the Yokohama Bunka Gym, which FMW announced a sellout of 5,500 fans, although Dave notes that he doesn't believe that many people can legitimately be in the building. We get a 6-man tag here with the Michinoku Pro wrestlers. It is Koji Nakagawa, Great Sasuke, and Hayabusa versus Super Delphin, Taka Michinoku, and Ricky Fuji. Dave writes in The Observer at this time that the draw of this show was Hayabusa and Sasuke working together as a team. Your thoughts on this 6-man tag as we round out 1995 once and for all?
Boy, does Taka have show a lot more edge in Delphin Core matches than Nanawa does at this point. And that was really kind of needed and was the linchpin for this. Hayabusa, really at this point, I mean, he is that star that everyone talks of him about, and him and Sasuke did feel kind of special. But the star of the match was Taka Michinoku, who does like some of the more brilliant like triple teams. Like Ricky Fuji isn't awful here, given how bad Ricky Fuji can be. And but at the end of the day, it's still really about Taka.
So I think Ricky Fuji was awful in this match, and I thought Koji Nakagawa was awful in this match, and I'm not sure that Hayabusa is all that good in this match either. Outside of the stereo Asai moonsault that he does with Sasuke, which did look awesome, this is a match that is entirely made up of Sasuke working his ass off and Taka working his ass off, and those are the only 2 guys that have any sort of redeeming qualities in this match to me. This is a giant 6-man tag at the end of the year with a ton of star power involved, and I think Taka and Sasuke just work circles around everybody.
But I think like that, as we've been saying, like that's the story of Taka. Taka is that guy, and it does. Yeah, I mean, this is like a
borderline bad match if Taka's not in it.
Yeah, but I mean, Taka's the shark. He's just, you put him in the ring with anyone at this point, and he's going to tear him apart, and it's going to be entertaining.
I agree with that. So 1995, we go from September through December on this episode, and it's a strange year. It feels like Michinoku Pro has grown up. They no longer feel like the little engine that could. They do feel like there is life and drive behind this promotion. They feel more legitimate than they did at the end of 1994, and I think part of that could be presentation of the buildings that they're running, but I also just think that this is a promotion that has developed a very nice roster, and you see, I think one of the surprising things to me in 1995 is just how well Sasuke's body holds up and how well Sasuke's work holds up. You see growth with Taka. You see some fun appearances from some old school luchadors in the year. We'll break down 1995 more at the end of this year. But as for this episode, because I know we talked about a ton of matches, the only things that I can really recommend are the Sabu versus Hakushi match, just for the historical anecdote of it, and then Tiger Mask versus Taka from 11/23, Kato Kung Lee and Sasuke versus Delphin and Nanawa from 11/23, and I guess Nanawa versus Liger from the J Cup if you've never seen it. But otherwise, for as much footage as we have here and for as interesting as some of this stuff is, we do not get anything truly great in this block of footage. And 1995, to some degree, ends with a whimper more than a bang.
Yeah, it came away a little bit more optimistic. I would say, though, I would co-sign a lot of your larger points about if it involves Tiger Mask and it involves Taka Michinoku over this time. They have another singles match that I caught. It was listed as the 11th, and it was really good. It was right before that, but like I still would say like that's like a 3.5-star match with it. It's a situation where I think I really like Dream Chasers versus Tiger Mask 4 and Hoshikawa.
Yeah, that
I
was
think
also very good. I'd recommend that as well.
And Case, I would say, just because I want to hear your thoughts on it, the PWFG match with Shoichi Funaki and Sasuke is worth checking out, just because of how different it is.
I will give that a watch before the next episode, and we'll talk about it then as we enter 1996 the next time around. We are there. We have told you the story of how Michinoku Pro began. We have walked you through the Sasuke versus Shinzaki and Sasuke versus Onita feuds. We have covered the Fukumen Mask League. We have rounded out 1995. In episode 13, we get to 1996, which will cover the January 10th, 1996 Michinoku Pro show. If we can find the footage, the Battle Arts debut show with Delphin and Taka versus Sasuke and Hoshikawa. And Mike, we get Michinoku Pro going abroad for the first time. We will cover the Michinoku Pro UK shows in early 1996, as well as some other stuff, including the year-end awards and how Michinoku Pro fared in the 1995 Observer Awards as compared to the 1994 Observer Awards. We'll also go over some awards ourselves and highlight the best matches of Michinoku Pro's 1995.
Absolutely so. And as I mentioned kind of earlier, this first 3 years chronologically of Michinoku Pro, we decided to essentially do each episode covering basically a season of the year. So every 3 months. So, for 1996, and I think until footage starts to dry up, we're going to essentially it's going to be 6 episodes per calendar year. So it'll be 2 months, as Case mentioned. We'll only be talking about January and February next time, but we'll be back with you to talk about the end of 1995 awards and the start of Michinoku Pro's probably most famous year, 1996. Next time on Those Days, you can find us on social media at Open Voice Gate. You could follow us on Blue Sky at that as well. Cases _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. If you're looking for match listings and all of that devoted to Those Days, we have our channel on the Voices of Wrestling Discord at Open Voice Gate is the channel, and that's where we'll post the match reviews. And whenever we are getting ready for the next Those Days in April, we'll make sure that you hear it there first. But that's going to do it this time. We'll be back with you next time talking 1996 and Michinoku Pro. Take care, everyone.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network listeners. I am Jeff Hawkins, co-host of Shake Them Ropes, with a very special announcement. If it's been a while or you've never listened to us before, the original gang is back. Myself and Rob McCarran, back talking wrestling. We have no idea where this show's going to go, where we're going to keep any of the old bits or any of the old things in there. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a journey, and we'd like for you to come along with us. Only on Shake Them Ropes on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.